Okay, folks, welcome to this presentation, which is going to cover the secret of Doctor Strange's strangest days. Now, this refers to a storyline in which Doctor Strange was apparently split into a trinity of persons. One being the elemental powered Strange, another being the mentalist Vincent Stevens, and then the original Doctor Strange himself. And it was a very, very weird time in the Marvel Universe. Now, if you're only used to Doctor Strange by way of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then you're probably only familiar with the exhibitions of his powers that fall along the lines of energy manipulation. Yeah, he uses his powers to make shields, he uses his powers to make bolts of lightning or whips of lightning, and then he also has energy manipulation that allows him to manipulate space and time and the elements and stuff like that. But if you're a reader of the comic book, you would know that one of the ways that Doctor Strange is at his most powerful and is truly worthy of the title Sorcerer Supreme is that he's able to cast spells and make invocations of higher entities who then lend him their powers. So here we see from a very early issue of Doctor Strange him mentioning the beings Dormammu, Agamotto, the Dwellers in the Darkness, Hoggoth. These are all higher extra dimensional beings from whom he occasionally borrows power by way of invoking their names in spells, often witch spells that rhyme. And by being able to tap into these sources of higher magic, he is able to do things that most other sorcerers cannot. Now, the agreement between the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth and the higher beings is a contractual agreement, and it can be broken, and it has been broken. When the Vishanti, another a trinity of higher beings, wanted to uh, enlist Doctor Strange into a 400-year-long war, Doctor Strange basically said, okay, I'm done with the whole higher beings thing, because after he refused them, all these other beings showed up wanting to recruit them into the same war. And he basically cast a spell that said, I renounce you all, and talked about them by name and said, I am not going to be beholden to you anymore, and likewise, you are not going to be beholden to me anymore. So at that point, the contract between Doctor Strange and these higher beings was broken. He could no longer call on them for power, and at that point, he was very, very drained of much of his abilities in magic. Now, after about 10 issues of him having to fight at a reduced power level, often relying on other supernatural beings like Morbius or Ghost Rider to help him out, in stepped new writer David Quinn. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of David Quinn before. He's mostly known for his own creator-owned material with Tim Vigil in the series Faust, and this was an award-winning series. It's very, very psychedelic and demon-heavy, and a whole lot of sex and rape and all this other kind of stuff. It's a very kind of really warped and twisted series, and I don't necessarily recommend it. But anyway, the fact that Marvel was able to get him to do Doctor Strange was considered quite a coup back then. And so he jumped in, and in the middle of the Siege of Darkness crossover that was going on because Doctor Strange was part of the Midnight Suns property at the time. And he basically did this split of Doctor Strange into the three characters I mentioned before, or at least a parent split. I'll talk more about what actually happened later. And the book began to focus on the exploits of the more elemental energy driven Strange entity, uh, who wound up getting immediately into conflicts with other Marvel beings. Now, the main enemy of the run between of David Quinn's run was the Sorceress Supreme Salome. She was actually a previous Sorcerer Supreme to Doctor Strange, who was exiled long ago, lost her title, and now she's back. in conflict with Doctor Strange, she caused him to have to basically disintegrate, it seemed. And then he was replaced by the Strange entity who then fought off Salome. So now we had the setting for these two issues basically provided the setting for what would come in the series, but they really didn't give us a lot of information about Strange, and we had yet to really be introduced to Vincent Stevens at this point. So it would be in the next few issues that we would get our introductions to those characters and what their purposes were going to serve. So in the next issue, after the Siege of Darkness crossover, we have Strange, this elemental energy entity, fighting with Doctor Doom over an artifact called the Oculus Ouroboros, and basically saying that, look, that belongs to me, I want it, and he took it and he actually absorbed it into his person. Now, at the end of this issue, we also learned, on account of Morbius's hanging around the ruins of Doctor Strange's old Sanctum Sanctorum, that Doctor Strange had survived his conflict with Salome and had also built himself a new Sanctum Sanctorum in a pocket outside of normal space and time. Now, a couple of issues later, we find that the Strange entity is working for Doctor Strange and brings him the artifact that he had just taken from Doctor Doom. And we also learn a couple issues later from there that Doctor Strange is using Strange as his proxy because he can't leave this sanctuary. If he does, he'll begin to disintegrate. The effects of the magic that Salome had cast upon him had affected his physical structure to the point where he could no longer act in the outside world. So basically, he had the Strange entity to go out and collect mystic artifacts of power for himself, hoping to build for himself a new base of magic to replace the spells and incantations that he had voluntarily given up before, so that he could resume his role as Sorcerer Supreme. Now, on the Vincent Stevens side, he created, or basically, he was using this Vincent Stevens guy to amass material wealth for himself, to basically create a power structure in the financial world by the use of dealing with the mob and doing things in business and using his mentalist powers to affect the minds of the people with whom he was getting into business dealings with, so that he would have a substantial financial base to return to so that Doctor Strange, rather, would have a substantial financial base to return to once he got into the real world again. So in the Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme Annual 4, we learned that these two beings that Strange is working through were actually created by Doctor Strange as basically magical automatons that were a combination of his own magic and Salome's magic, so that they could work out in the real world, whereas he could not. And he gave them certain semblances of his personality so that only they so he gave them certain semblances of his personality, so that they didn't have his whole personality. Strange had his savagery, and Vincent Stevens had the rapacity for money and power that he had back when he was a surgeon. But neither of them was the whole package. Neither of them was the real Doctor Strange. He himself retained the identity of the real Doctor Strange, and these two were just kind of like magical androids in a way. Now, I don't want to bother you with how this all turned out. I mean, suffice it to say that, good eventually won the day. Doctor Strange built himself a new magical system for himself called the Gaian Aura that was tapped in to the Earth itself and had to do with drawing energy from the Earth's geomagical fields. And so now Doctor Strange was going around in this hippy dippy trippy outfit and trying to rectify some of the mistakes that his automatons had made at the time. And this really didn't last long. This lasted all of 4 issues, and then Warren Ellis took over. They redesigned Doctor Strange's outfit, and also redesigned his magic for some reason. Replaced the Gaian aura with catastrophe magic or change magic. Why? I don't know. Sometimes these authors, when they come onto a property, they just basically curb stomp everything the prior author did and say, well, I'm just going to do it my way. I don't really think that was warranted here, but it's what they went with. So, my question, though, over the whole thing is that even though we know that Doctor Strange created these 2 automatons, this Vincent Stevens and this energy being Strange, as his proxies in the world, why were they created in this particular way? And what inspired David Quinn to write this kind of story in the first place, where you had Doctor Strange effectively split among these 3 beings? I mean, granted, he basically created these 2 beings independently among himself, but it really feels like a kind of split, as if I'm going to take certain facets of Doctor Strange's abilities and put them into Vincent Stevens. I'm going to take certain facets of Doctor Strange's abilities and put them into Strange. And then I'm going to retain the empty void where Doctor Strange has lost his ability to cast spells and do incantations. And I'm going to try and find out, we're going to play around from that perspective and have this trinity of characters. Where specifically did he get the idea or inspiration from that? Well, I think I know, because I really felt when I was reading this series that there was something that I myself had read before from Marvel Comics that would have been pointing a direction in exactly this way if somebody were to step in and want to do something new with Doctor Strange. Now, I can't say this for sure. I've never seen any interview with David Quinn where he's referenced this. I don't have any supplemental materials that say that David Quinn's inspiration was this, but I really think that he likely got his idea for this storyline from the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, and specifically the Doctor Strange entry. Because in every magic user's entry, whether it's Doctor Strange or Baron Mordo or various other magic users, Clea, etc., there is always this magic primer section that always starts off the powers and abilities portions of these superheroes and supervillains' abilities. And it goes something like this in the Doctor Strange entry. Strange's magic, like that of most magicians, is derived from 3 major sources: personal powers of the soul, mind, and body, derived through developing one's own psychic resources, mesmerism, astral projection, thought casting, etc. Powers gained by tapping this universe's ambient magical energy and employing it for specific effects: teleportation, illusion casting, energy projection. And finally, powers gained through the tapping of extra dimensional energy by invoking entities or objects of power existing in mystical dimensions tangential to his own. The latter means of power is usually gained by the recitation of spells, either ritualized ones found in various mystical texts or by original spells invoking extra dimensional assistance. So, if you go by this magic primer, you get 3 kinds of magic. You get mental powers, you get elemental energy, and then you get invocations, or whatever it is that Doctor Strange now has to replace the invocations with, now that he no longer has access to those. How doesn't this correspond 1-to-1 with the 3 characters? You've got Vincent Stevens with his mental abilities to cloud people's minds, make them see things that they don't realize aren't there, to change their minds when need be. Then you have Strange, who is a character based almost entirely off of elemental energy, and he just brute forces his way through everything. And then last, you've got Doctor Strange himself, who is confined to his sanctum sanctorum in the pocket dimension because he doesn't have invocations and he's needing to create a new form of magic for himself. Now, again, I can't say whether this was actually the basis for the power for the story or not, but it does correspond in such a one-to-one way with the three characters that he created or massaged into this template that I would love it if it were true, because basically it would mean that there was something good that actually came out of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, aside from trapping me in hours of reading text. I would love it if people actually went back to things like this and used them as their inspiration. Sort of like I think there was actually one Spider Man story in which some of the defining Spider Man's clinging to walls ability as an electrostatic manipulation was used in a story in either Web of Spider Man or Spectacular Spider Man by Electro, or whoever was writing the story, really. But Electro realized that Spider-Man basically stuck to walls by static cling, and then used his electric powers to cancel out his wall crawling abilities. So that would be another example where somebody might have actually used this book to create a story that appeared in the comics. So I would love it if there were a way to confirm whether David Quinn had actually read this primer from the Marvel Universe and then uh, adapted that into his Doctor Strange story. I'd like to think that he did, and that is indeed the secret behind Doctor Strange's Strangest Days. So, thank you for accompanying me on this exploration of Doctor Strange during one of his weirdest story arcs. And I hope that you will subscribe so that you will catch the next exploration of comics. And then I guess I will talk to you later. Thanks again.